Yeah, so we'll start right at the beginning of all this. Tell me about Archer Alexander. You know, what you were able to learn about him and his story. Yeah.
Well, 2 years ago, I didn't know who Archer was. And I've been doing genealogy for about 33 years. And I always wondered who Archer was, who Wesley's father was. Wesley Alexander, my great-great-grandfather. So over time, I charted out four of my grandmothers, all 8 of my great-grandmothers, all 16 of my great-great-grandparents, and some of my third great-grandparents. And then, I was working on Wesley, and I didn't know who Wesley's father was. So, I would go to the census and 1860, 70, 80 census, and I'd see Wesley said his father was from Virginia. And so I looked at all the other Black Alexanders, and their father were from different places, not Virginia. So I assumed they weren't, any kin to Wesley. So finally, when I was doing 23andMe, and I saw this MA, and that I was related to as a third cousin, and I didn't know who that MA was because it didn't have any other information. And then I saw another one that had anonymous, and I didn't know who that was. And one day I was looking through an anonymous, and it was May. But what she did, she wanted to be anonymous, but what she did, she put her paternal surnames, Clay and Grady, and her mother's surname on the information. Boyd was her mother's maiden name. So then I said, well, that's the descendant of Muhammad Ali and Belinda Boyd. So when I saw May, she came to town about 4 years ago, and I saw her, I had lunch with her. And I said, did you do a DNA test on 23andMe? And she said, yes, I did. But she didn't tell me that her father did one. So one day I was looking through trying to figure out who the MA was. And then I saw it said, daughter, anonymous. So I clicked on the anonymous, and it was May. So then I knew that that MA was Muhammad Ali. And I knew that was May. Okay, so then I saw that May, Muhammad, and I matched this guy named Stephen Alexander. And he was a fourth cousin once removed. He was a generation below Muhammad and myself. So his father was our fourth cousin. And all fourth cousins have the same third great-grandparent. So I have all my second great-great-grandparents charted out. And since he matched me and Muhammad and May, they are on my mother's side. So I can eliminate the 8 paths, the 8 great-great-grandparents on my father's side. And on my mother's side, there's only, of the 8 great-great-grandparents that we only have one in common. And at the top of that common branch is Wesley Alexander. So this Archer is going to be the parent of either Wesley or his wife. Well, I know who his wife's parents are. So that means that Wesley is the son of Archer Alexander. And to verify it even more, there's a paternal haplogroup that's only passed from father to son. And the good thing about matching on 23andMe, they give a paternal haplogroup. So Archer, the guy I matched, Stephen, is going to have the same paternal haplogroup as Archer. So on my side, I got Wesley's great-grandson do a DNA test. So he should have the same paternal haplogroup as Archer. And he had the same paternal haplogroup as Stephen. So that meant that the haplogroups were the same. Okay, to prove it even more, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I mean, what have you learned about Archer Alexander and his story as a former slave and what he did, 140 something years ago, 50 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, he came to St. Louis in 1829 with the guy that owned him, James Harvey Alexander. And James Harvey Alexander's wife came along, and there were about 40 people on the trip, and they left Rockbridge, Virginia, came to St. Charles, Missouri. Took them 2 months to do it, because there's a lady in St. Louis, Doris Frankie, who has the journal that they kept in 1829 when they left Rockbridge, Virginia, and came to St. Louis. So he was a slave of James Harvey Alexander, but James Harvey Alexander died in about 1840. Him and his wife died of cholera. So Archer and his wife were sold to different people. So Archer was sold to Mr. Pittman, and his wife Louisa was sold to James Naylor. So they lived on 2 separate farms in Missouri. And one day Archer was overheard his owner and some rebel sympathizers talking about how they destroyed the supports on a railroad bridge, and that it would collapse when the Union soldiers came over the bridge. So Archer heard that, and in the middle of the night, it was in the wintertime, he traveled 5 miles and warned the Union soldiers, and the Union soldiers were able to repair the bridge so it wouldn't collapse. So, if the train was coming over the bridge, it would collapse, and since they're hooked together, it would pull all the other cars down with it. So he might have saved 50 or 100 lives. We don't know, because it didn't happen. But he also knew that on the Campbell farm that the rebels were storing arms, and he told the Union soldiers about that. So after he did that, he couldn't go back to to his wife or his kids. They sent him to St. Louis, where he was protected by William Greenleaf Eliot. And as a matter of fact, he lived on William Greenleaf's property, and he did work for William Greenleaf Eliot. And one day, some bounty hunters came and got him and beat him up and took him to jail. And when William Greenleaf Eliot heard about it, he went to the jail and got him released, because he helped the Union soldiers. He was able to get an order of protection. So after that, William Greenleaf Eliot sent him to Alton, Illinois, to work as a farmhand, and he also was able to get some Germans to get Louisa and 2 of his kids to come and be with him in Illinois. But he saved a lot of lives, and his father was not. His father was a minister, and he preached against slavery back in Virginia, and because of that, he was sold down south. So it's all that in William Greenleaf Eliot's book.
Based on that, your story of the family tree, and then also learning about Archer's story, what does the Emancipation Monument mean to you in DC?
Well, it means, you got to look at a monument because it was built back in 1860s, 70s. And if everybody knew that he was breaking the chains from his ankles in the process of standing, they would look at it different. He wasn't being subservient to anybody. As a matter of fact, there's a book about Abraham Lincoln, and it talks about a slave was so thankful being free that when he saw Abraham Lincoln, he came up to Abraham Lincoln and kneeled and kissed his feet. And Abraham Lincoln said, "The only one you kneel to is God. You never do that to me." And I got that printed, so I send that to some people.
Based on, I mean, what would be your message to the protesters who are out there saying it should be knocked down, and that it's a
So,
sign of racial undertones of black people being inferior to white people, with Lincoln holding his hand out to Mr. Alexander. I mean, what do you have to say to the protesters who believe that?
I say they need to learn about Archer in his life. He wasn't subservient. That was the statue was paid for by slaves. The total, the one in Washington was paid for by slaves, and who would just freed themselves. And he saved a lot of lives with what he did, and knowing that he could have been lynched if he had been caught. He's also, Muhammad Ali's third great grandfather. A lot of people don't know that, and he didn't bow down to anybody. That statue was made by a sculptor, and he sculptured it the way he wanted it. Archer met Abraham Lincoln. He met the sculptor who did the sculpture. As a matter of fact, when it was dedicated, I believe there was a guy that, I forgot his name, said about the same thing, you shouldn't be kneeling. But, that was in 1860s. In 1860s, slaves had to be subservient. When they were slaves, they had to be.
Even following the,
But he wasn't.
yeah, no, I mean, as you said, saved lives, and man, a hero.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I mean, have you been following the developments on the debate in Louisville? What's happening? Yeah.
I've been following, what they say in Massachusetts and Boston and Washington, D.C. Really, they haven't been talking about it much in Louisville. I haven't heard anything on the news here in Louisville. It's just Washington, D.C. and Boston. There's a lady named Doris Franke who was writing a book about Archer. And she had known Archer story before I knew, because I didn't find out for about a year, 2.5 years ago. But she knew about Archer 20 years ago, and she had been teaching genealogy in the St. Louis area about the founders of St. Louis. So she knew about Archer and the people who owned her. And I went with her to Washington, D.C. We went to the National Archives to try to find information. We went to Rockbridge, Virginia. I met a descendant of James Harvey Alexander. I met a descendant of the Pittmans who used to own, Archer. So I met the descendants of two people who used to own Archer Alexander. We went to the cemetery where Archer's buried, St. Peter's Cemetery, and he's buried in a mass grave. When he was buried, they would bury 2 and 3 people in the same hole, in the same plot. And then the next 3 people died, they would bury him in the next plot over. So he's buried in that cemetery, and his wife is buried in that cemetery, but they're not buried together. And there's no markers for any of them. But we just know the area where they were buried.
So you were saying third great grandfather to Muhammad, and what is your? I know it's distant, but what is your relation to Archer Alexander?
Same thing, third great grandson.
One of my last questions. What do you think the Emancipation Monument means to the country? Means to DC? Again, based when you learn the history and the story of Archer Alexander, what do you think it means to the country and the city of DC, this Emancipation Monument?
I think if the people knew about Archer Alexander and how he lived and what he did, that they would take pride in seeing that memorial. If they understand, they should understand that you can't change history. you can't change history. That's the way it was. Even though Archer was not subservient, he did what he thought was right, and his actions were to help free other slaves by helping the Union.
Thank you so much for talking to us. I know you had to drive a little ways to talk to us, but I sincerely appreciate it because it's a big conversation that's happening in DC right now about this statue, and we want to get all voices that we can, you know, who are.
Another thing, May, his daughter, told a newspaper in Boston that she thought he was subservient and it should be removed. I talked to May. She didn't change her mind. I called 15 other descendants and cousins, first and second cousins of Muhammad Ali. They all think it should stay. Matter of fact, John Henry Clay, who was Muhammad Ali's great grandfather, was a slave of Henry Clay, the senator. And they don't think his statue should be removed either. Henry Clay,
yeah.
Excuse me?
No, just a deep conversation, and, you know, it's just different voices, different perspectives, and I thought your perspective on it all was very important to get. So, and we're covering, there's a big event down there tonight at 6 o'clock here in DC that we're going to be covering. So, yeah, but I sincerely appreciate you talking to us. Yeah, just it's interesting.
Second,
yeah.
Like I said before earlier, I had Rahman do a DNA test. I did one, and Muhammad's first cousin, Cedric Turner, did one, and we match about 80 people who are descendants of Louisa's owner. So that's another connection.
She was the wife, right? Wife of Archer?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And she was the daughter of one of John McClure's son, because we match John McClure's side and his wife's side. People in both their trees.
Thank you. How close are you with Muhammad? Did you see him a lot back in the day, or?
When he would come to town, but, you know, he'd come to, after 1960, when he came to town, there'd be 200 or 300 people around. And, you know, his father and his father's 7 or 8 brothers and sisters and my parents and myself, we went to the same church. And if you leave me your email, I could send you a whole bunch of information.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great. I would love that. The email where this invite came actually would be the email to send it to. You'll see it's like thomas.r.dempsey.
Okay.
But I sincerely appreciate talking to us. Thank you for adding your voice and sharing your story and adding perspective to it all. And you have my number too. So if you have any other questions, or, you know, think we should be paying attention to something. And you live in Louisville, you said, correct?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to add that you think is important to this discussion and conversation about this monument and Archer and DC and yeah?
Well, you know, I wish people would study and know about something before they want to tear it down. You know, if they knew what I know about Archer, I think 90% of them would change their mind. And matter of fact, I would like for you to do me a favor and call Doris Frankie.
Doris Frankie, yeah.
And I think I have a phone number here. She has been doing research on Archer for 25, 30 years. And let me see if I can get a phone number.
That'd be great. Yeah, I mean, great voice to get.
Yeah. I'm going to get it out of my phone here. Her number is area code 636-221-1524.
636-221-1524.
That's right.
Perfect. I'll tell her you gave me the number too.
Okay.
Let me just triple check something. And it's Keith Winstead.
Yes.
Keithwinstead.
That's right.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Keith. It's very nice meeting you. Like I said, I read a lot about it. I enjoy learning about history and reading about it. So it's, for me personally, it adds a whole new dimension to it. Yeah.
I'm gonna email you a picture of Muhammad and Rahman standing next to their great grandmother, who was about 99 years old when this picture's taken, and she is the granddaughter of Archer. So I'll send you that picture.
Got it. Thank you so much. I'm going to click out of this now, but I sincerely appreciate you talking to us. Thank you.
Okay. Anytime.
Yep. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.